Hey, I'm here tonight with paranormal expert Kathryn Cornelison. She's from Creepy Americana. We're going to go over Near Dark, a little known movie from 1987, directed by the big time director, Kathryn Bigelow. Hello, Kathryn. How are you tonight?
Hey, not Kathryn Bigelow though.
I have talked to some directors. Good.
Yes, yes.
I assume you didn't know this movie before I pointed it out to you. Is that correct?
Absolutely not. Yes, definitely not.
What do you think?
It's very schlocky in a way that I like. It's got
Schlocky?
that. Yes, yes. I mean, I am. I don't want to say connoisseur, but I am a known lover of B, C, and D tier horror movies. You know what I mean? I
Yes.
I I will watch it, and I don't care if I can see the strings that they're using to hold up their monsters. Like, it shows me that they put a lot of love and care into it.
I agree with you. This movie could have been pretty big, but they had a distribution snafu and it never really got out. It's not even available online. I had to buy the DVD to get it. There's not a lot of big
Except
stars, except who?
Bill Paxton.
Bill Paxton. Oh, he was a big star, and I've got some notes that I want to get into later. Bill Paxton, just an amazing bad guy. He's so good in so much stuff, but it's pretty amazing. So, did you want to kind of just jointly go over what happened in this movie together?
I figured you could kind of handle more of the plot stuff, and then I can kind of jump in and give you some information about like why the vampires behave in certain ways or why they kind of have certain rules and that kind of stuff, and kind of get into the folklore of it.
Okay. I got some notes here too.
Okay.
Basically, I'm wearing my Southwestern bandana in a tribute to this Southwestern vampire movie. Although, I don't know if you noticed this, they
Mm,
never said the word vampire in this movie. It was never said.
interesting.
Yes, it was very interesting.
I
And we'll,
guess you see certain tropes and you see behaviors and the way that they look and stuff like that, and you just kind of make some assumption.
right, right. But they just never used that word. All right, so Caleb's kind of a not nice redneck living up there in Oklahoma somewhere, Kansas. I don't know. It's all the same. Some
The
flat
Great
part of
Plains
some part of
somewhere.
flat. Yeah, he's up there and he sees this very attractive girl, and that's for the first time you notice the director's work. She's the way she shoots the girl down the street. She's the main third out there. She's eating the ice cream, and he goes up and says, "Can I have a bite?" Which is a great opening line to a vampire. And then he says, "I'm dying for the taste of a cone." So, so she takes him away, and he tries to he'd be his regular self. And eventually she bites him, but flees because of the sunset without killing him or turning him. What does that mean?
Okay. That's I want to jump in here.
Okay.
So, I want to talk a bit about, first of all, biting. Um but I also want to talk about the sun thing. So, I kind of have to start a little bit at the beginning and kind of give you some background just about vampires in general. There's so much going on here, and I will tell you that a lot of my source for this information comes from this book, Vampires, Burial, and Death: Folklore and Reality by Paul Barber. Very good book. Highly recommend. Obviously, it's not all from that. Some of it's from up here, some of it's from other research, and I'll kind of talk about that as I um, get through it. But let me just start with the vampire of Europe, the European folkloric vampire. Okay, so the vampire of this time is kind of the medieval times, Middle Ages into the late 1800s. And what do we know about Europe at this time? They're very religious. They are very superstitious. They are very, very concerned about demons. And they also don't know anything about germs or the decomposition of dead bodies, right?
And the Black Death.
Absolutely. I read a whole book about that I could recommend to you as well. But anyway. So yes, at this time period, they don't know anything about germs, how things spread, why people get sick. And it basically comes down to they start blaming people who have died for, especially the ones who kind of died first, as the people who are now coming out of their grave and attacking other people, and they're mostly doing it at night. Now, one of the things I did look up because I was curious why vampires attack at night. I knew there had to be some kind of reason for this, and I think this is just speculation in my personal brain. First of all, we don't see the vampires coming out of their graves during the daytime, right? So when is everybody asleep? They're asleep at night, and they're saying that these vampires are doing these things that nobody's seeing. So clearly, vampires must be active at night. Additionally, when you are sick, when do you feel the worst?
Daytime.
Daytime. Really?
I don't know. I'll
Oh,
guess again. At night.
yes, at night. There is some science about our circadian rhythms kind of going into overdrive at night where our antibodies and stuff are working harder at night. And so you often feel worse at night, especially when you feel like you might be getting better during the daytime. So I think these things in conjunction kind of lead us to the nocturnal vampire mythos. So I do then want to talk about germ theory because we didn't discover germ theory until the late 1800s. Yes, sir.
Before you get into that, and I'm not sure if we talked about this or not, but this is also a ritual of inversion with Jesus, who was hung on a cross. Vampire could be healed by a cross, died, and then rose 3 days later. You die, you become a vampire 3 days later. So it's also a mix up on that story, a mashup.
Basically, vampires are super Christian. That's like the main thing that I'm trying to get out here. They don't exist without Christianity, right? Because why do they think that these things are happening when they don't have any explanations for them? They don't understand germs. They don't know how diseases are spread. They don't understand dead bodies. So they start digging people up just to find some kind of answers. And they see these decomposition and these things that they don't understand. So they're seeing people who are bloated, and they see people who have red lips, and they see, when they stake them, the blood seems to be liquid instead of congealed like they would expect. And a lot of these things that we wind up doing in order to dispatch a vampire, these are things called apotropaic. I think I'm saying that right. Apotropaics. Um, and they're used to dispatch vampires, but the main point of them is to turn evil away. So the idea is that the
Hmm.
vampire has been taken over by a demon. And
Okay.
so who do they look for guidance on what to do? Priests, religious leaders. What do we do to get rid of this demon? So, this is how we get things like staking, burying them face down, um, removing their head and placing it somewhere else, and placing grave goods, right? Something to either prevent them from becoming a revenant or to stop them from being a revenant. Um, so it's a very Christian thing to do.
Well,
Um,
we didn't get very far into the summary.
no, I wasn't done either. I'm so sorry. I have more to talk about. I told
Oh,
you I wrote like
keep
3 pages.
keep
Um,
going then.
so all this is to say, let's come back to this a little bit. So again, they don't understand the decomposition of bodies. They see them in rigor mortis. They see the liver mortis, which is when the blood is pooling in a particular part of the body. That's
Hmm.
whatever is like gravity, right? And so that can lead to that liquid blood still happening. Um, and they also, one of the stages is bloating. And for some reason, they see this body that's double in size and they say, oh, yep, that's definitely a vampire. And a lot of times the bodies smell bad. But again, in this time period, they didn't understand germs. And so what they thought was causing diseases was bad smell. So
Malaria.
another thing that they start doing is burning things, tar, wood, tobacco, anything to try to get rid of that smell because they think that that's the way to, you know, get rid of the disease, the problems, right? So Why are we sucking on the neck? We know Dracula, right? Dracula is kind of the most famous contemporary version of the vampire. But there's actually a story that came before Dracula in 1819, and it's a story called The Vampire, spelled with a Y, by a man named John Philidori, and this was published in 1819. So this is like 80 years before Dracula. And they're both really part of this vampiric canon, as it were. And the vampire does influence um,
Okay.
Dracula. So it is all kind of part of the same thing. And then also, what is happening in Europe at this time? Well, we're industrializing. We are kind of becoming more nationalistic. We're more afraid of the other. And so this is all kind of part of it. And what is happening is these vampires are being kind of turned into figures of something to fear, right? So we fear Dracula. He's this guy who is mysterious and lives up on a hill, in this village. And we fear the main character of the vampire, which is this guy named Lord Ruthven, because he's like a murderer and he's mysterious and he's kind of a philanderer. But the vampire is inherently a sensual creature. At the risk of being too graphic, I'll just say this: rigor mortis. Okay, we're moving on.
Yeah.
So, why are we sucking at the neck? It is an inherently sensual act. And The Vampire actually was a story written by a guy who knew Lord Byron and heard this story from Lord Byron. And Lord Byron is a known bisexual figure in the literary space, right? So the book The Vampire is about a man named Aubrey who falls in with this other guy, Lord Ruthven. He becomes scorned, and then he goes to Greece, which is kind of the bad part of Europe where those like scary, darker people live,
Uh-huh.
And this is kind of where the whole neck biting thing comes from. It's this is kind of the origin of it. It's from this story. And we see then at the beginning a lot of contemporary movies and books and stuff that people become vampires because they get bit by a beautiful stranger or they get lured in by a beautiful stranger. We see this in The Lost Boys. We see this in this movie. May is this beautiful girl who brings him into the vampire world, right? And so, yeah, beautiful strangers. Thanks, Lord Byron. Okay.
Okay.
So, with all that very long winded stuff out of the way, let's continue with the plot of Near Dark.
Okay. All right. So Caleb and May are out together on the first night, but she the horse reacts badly to her. Did you notice that? The horse started pulling
Oh,
away.
Booker.
Yes.
I am Frau Blucher.
Animals reacting badly, that shows up in a lot of vampire films. So very,
I didn't
very
do
many.
notes on that. Sorry.
No, I did. I'm just asking your opinion
Yeah.
on that. And then
I do think that is interesting, obviously, because when you see in Dracula, he can transform into multiple different animals. And I'm
right.
not totally sure where that comes from, but I would assume that it has a lot to do with the folklore as well, because what are these people who live in Europe afraid of? The forest, the woods, anything. You just need to stay in your little village. You need to stay safe. You need to pray to God. You need to make sure you don't get attacked by any demons
And wolves
and wolves
and bats.
and bats.
Same thing we're afraid of now, right?
Hmm?
I hope those bats don't bite me. So when she bites him and then eventually she has to run home before the light comes out, and that's where we were. But he's heading
Yes, I don't want
across
to
the
talk about that too. The sunlight. Wait, no, we already talked about it. We're good. Okay, we're good on the
okay.
sunlight thing.
All right, so She doesn't kill him. She doesn't finish him off. And he's heading home across the field. And the sun comes up. And that's the first time you notice those John Ford vistas with the mesas in the background and the sun. This movie is beautifully
Beautiful.
shot.
Mm.
Yeah. He makes it, he's about to make it home. His father and sister see him coming across the field smoking. And this RV comes charging across the field with the windows all blacked out and smoked up. And they grab him up. And you know what RV stands for, right?
Oh, I know the V stands for vehicle. Recreational vehicle?
Recreational vampires. So they
Nice.
get him, and then they're about to kill him off. They're about to finish him off, and then
But May
May's like,
thinks he's so cute.
yes, don't kill my boyfriend. I want a boyfriend too. I love you. I got a kiss of your face.
Mhm.
Yeah. So they don't. The guy gives him a week. The main guy, which is Hooker, and it was played by Lance Hendrickson. And you know, he's later on in the movie, you find out he's from the Civil War, and they stole that for Vampire Bill and the Sookie Stackhouse ones. You know, you're
Wait,
left up.
when was the Sookie Stackhouse book first written?
I
I
don't
didn't
know.
realize
I
they
don't
were
care.
that.
I
Oh,
don't care. They stole it. Somebody stole it. Okay.
okay.
A
Somebody
Civil
did
War.
steal it. I mean, and I think that actually shows up in Twilight as well. One of the vampire coven dudes was also, I think he was a Confederate soldier.
Oh, I thought they were all 16 in that movie.
I'm 17. How long have you been 17?
Yeah. So anyway,
Wow.
I was going to say here at this point, and this is play right back into you. They throw all the lore out. Like I said, they never say vampire. They throw all the lore out, and then can vampires ride in a darkened van after sunup? Can you accidentally turn somebody, or do you have to intentionally do it? Don't they need to die to be reborn?
Yeah, so in folklore, people typically do die first and then they're resurrected as revenants. I mean, the word vampire isn't immediately used. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what happens is kind of later on we start to see these same kinds of stories, these same kinds of accounts from these barbaric Eastern European countries, with Western people coming in and starting to like observe them and kind of get the information. And sometimes these people were not even seeing these accounts directly; they were just getting it from the villagers and stuff. So the word vampire wasn't necessarily being used immediately. So I do think it is interesting that they never actually chose to use the word in this movie.
Yeah. Well, so do you think they could ride around like that?
Well, that is an interesting question because if we look at Dracula, Dracula shows up during the daytime. In fact, it's kind of surprising. I remember when I first read it, and there's a character that shows up and it's during the daytime, and you're kind of like, I would think that's Dracula, but it's daytime. That doesn't sound right. Um, he's able to be up and around during the daytime. He's just a little bit weaker, but
Like a
he's
big old hibernating bear.
so sure you could see it like that. Right, but his powers are stronger at night for, whatever reason. And I mean,
Right.
obviously, again, I think there's something to that, oh, we don't see the vampires come out of their graves because everybody's asleep. They only do it when everyone's asleep. And the funny thing too is that a lot of the people who get blamed for being vampires when after they die are people who are a little bit ornery, people who others don't really like as much. They were a problem in life, and so now it becomes very easy to scapegoat them in death.
A little Salem witch trials.
A little bit. I think there's a strain of that too, because you see, we actually had a vampire scare here in the United States. Um, you know what I mean? And very fun fact, well, not so fun, but in the 1800s in North Carolina, they actually depicted Black people as vampires because, again, it's this making the vampire into a villain, people that we don't like.
Oh, okay.
So
Gotcha. Very
it's
much.
interesting.
So he meets everybody in the van, the whole crew, and Bill Paxton. I just have to say how great he is. He was such a great actor, and he
Yeah.
really is missed. You
Hmm.
know, he uses that line "finger licking good" when he licks the blood off his fingers, and then you got Homer, the old man in the little boy's body,
Yeah,
and that's kind of echoes of Kirsten Dunst in the Interview with the Vampire.
absolutely. I was thinking that too. With what is that character's Claudia? Claudia is the
Cody,
name of
okay, I
that
didn't know.
character.
And then the line, "Holy Eddie Munster" from the Lost Boys when the little boy attacks.
The Frog
So
Brothers. The Frog Brothers. It's I don't remember what that Laddie, I think his name is. The
Laddie,
little boy.
yes.
Laddie.
Yeah, with Star.
Yeah.
Okay. And he
Yeah,
just
and
mentioned,
that's interesting too. And I know we'll get into the like plot a little bit more, but I did I couldn't help making connections to the Lost Boys with this movie just because it feels like it feels very pop culture. I don't know. Does that make sense?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
okay. So I did find it very interesting, and I'll talk about this a little bit right now. But one of the things that happens is that they test him by wanting him to go kill somebody, and drink their blood and stuff. And it's interesting because I did look up some scientific journals about blood drinking. And basically, there's nothing in human blood that a person couldn't get from any other source, any other blood. So I find it really interesting that that's kind of like the test is, oh, you have to do this. And it reminds me of in The Lost Boys how Star and Laddie weren't full vampires because they hadn't drinking human blood,
Right.
at least beyond the first time that makes them the vampire in the first place. But you know what I mean. Um, so it seems interesting. And when I was looking that up, this is totally unrelated, but in 2015, a group of science students from the University of Leicester, did a study to try to figure out how long it would take a vampire to fully drain a human body of blood.
Oh,
And
yeah.
what they came up with was about 6 minutes to drain 15%.
Ooh, that's a lot.
So
That's a lot
it would
slower
take
than it's been portrayed.
exactly. I just
Yeah.
thought that was an interesting little tidbit.
Now, did we talk about this last time? The vampires just rip the vein open and start lapping it up, or do they have straws in their fangs? I'm a very strong believer in
The
straws in the
straws.
fang. Straws in the fang. You stick the two fangs in there and just suck it out through the straws.
That's really funny. That reminds me, this is also totally unrelated, but it reminds me of a cartoon I used to watch as a kid called The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. And it's like these two kids who, for some reason, become friends with the Grim Reaper. And he's like a Jamaican guy for some reason. But he has a friend who is Dracula, and there's this part where Dracula goes, Dracula doesn't suck. Dracula scrape and lick. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's a very funny idea to have straws in your teeth. But here's the thing, right? If even if you just make those two punctures because you're in the carotid artery right here,
Yeah,
that I mean your heart is pumping that blood really quickly. So you really wouldn't have to do much other than just cut and let it happen.
I guess, but like in all the old classics that I like, they have two perfectly neat holes in there.
There's something so Victorian about
Yes,
it.
about neat holes. Well, so Caleb leaves. He's trying to make his way home, and he goes through the town. And you know what's playing on the movie theater? It's playing at the
I
movie
didn't
theater.
catch it.
Aliens,
Ooh.
and because
So
uh,
does that set this in a particular time period then?
it sets it that Kathryn Bigelow and James Cameron were dating, so they took this.
Oh.
So they took Bill Paxton. They took what's his name, the hooker, um,
Mhm. That
Hendrickson, and one other one from that
okay.
movie.
That's
So
interesting too. Because
Yeah.
Alien, the first one, is a Ridley Scott movie, and it's very much like a horror movie. But then James Cameron gets his mitts all over it and turns it into an action movie.
Okay.
It's
Well,
very
it's, I
different.
think I look at it. Again, I'm having bad deja vu. I look at it as one smart. They don't listen to one smart lady, and everybody dies except the smart lady and the cat.
Mm-hmm.
That's the movie I see. Okay,
True.
press on here. So anyway, he is on that bus, and he's very sick and puking, and um, which is I looked at that, and that's about normal for a bus ride. You know, if you ever been on one of those, it's like, yeah, a lot of half dead people coughing and spewing blood and stuff like that. So I thought
I
that was
rode a lot of buses in Europe to travel to different places. I
not
haven't
the
done a
same.
whole lot of busing in the U.S. I'll say
No,
that.
they're rolling tuberculosis wards. You know, they're bad. And so anyway, he gets May comes and finds him, and she lets him drink her blood. Now, I don't know when that became a thing.
Right, how
Whether
that's how you turn into a vampire is
yeah,
drinking the blood of the vampire.
yeah. I think it was
Yeah, I'm
in
not sure.
Interview with a Vampire.
I was kind of thinking that too, and then him getting sick too reminds me of Interview with the Vampire too, because or Interview with the Vampire, right?
Oh,
Um,
Vampire, I think.
it's the vampire.
Is it? Okay, I stand
Because
corrected.
the vampire is Louis, and he's telling this whole story about Lestat. Blah, 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 blah. Anyway, uh, um, where was I going to? Oh yeah, but Louis gets really sick during that time
Yeah,
when he's transforming.
right, because all your organs are dying and everything.
hmm
Okay,
So
so
again, body decomposition
right, so a
coming full
little bit
circle.
later, he's given his week trial, you know, and him and May go out to kill somebody, and they meet a truck driver who's described as the Cajun truck driver, which is okay, but it's real convenient that the guy gives him a lesson on how to jackknife a truck. You know,
Yes, that definitely won't come back.
no, they'll never see that again.
So
Okay,
random.
yeah. So he can't kill, but May lets him drink from her, and he almost kills her by accident. So they go on. They get back with the gang, and they bust into this bar, and are just as mean as can be. But the song "Naughty Naughty" is playing. That song was first played in a movie, St. Elmo's Fire, where the young lady
Mm,
who plays May was
mm.
also for the ex-wife
Ah,
of Rob Lowe.
Rob Lowe. I
Rob
was gonna
Lowe.
say Pony
So
Boy.
yeah, it's kind of like that. But she was the ex-wife of Rob Lowe's character, and she
Gotcha.
was just a nasty, horrible person. So when I saw her in this movie, I'm like, oh, it's a nasty, horrible person, which usually
Yeah.
means they're doing a good job acting.
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely. When I remember when you and mom would have like particular character, particular actors you just wouldn't like because you saw them in one movie and you just couldn't stand them anymore. It's
yeah,
like that just means they did a good job.
it does. It's like
They're convincing.
I couldn't stand Meryl Streep for years after she did Kramer versus Kramer, and then she's just amazing now. You know, so can't watch it.
She's great.
So anyway, they managed to leave one guy alive, and Caleb's supposed to go kill him. Caleb chickens out.
Of course.
The
Because
whole
he has to
gang,
stay pure at heart.
but he was a bad guy, you know. He was really kind of with him. He wasn't really pure. He just draw the line at murder. I'll do everything else. I'll shoot at
Except
cops
murder.
and
Sure, sure.
except murder.
Well, that's
So
not a bad thing.
so the whole gang retreats back to a hotel room, and sure enough, the cops show up and want to start blazing away. Now, every time these shootouts happen, they're shooting holes in the top of the wall, middle of the wall, bottom of the wall.
They're
You should
doing
just focus.
stormtrooper aiming.
You should just focus all your fire right at the bottom of the wall, because they're either standing there and you can shoot them in the leg, or they're laying down and you can shoot them. But anyway, they're shooting all these holes, and it was really well done, because like the holes would open up and the vampire would get burned. So when it's looking really bad, Caleb breaks out of the building, runs, catches on fire, jumps in the van, and rescues the whole crew. And so they're like, okay, you can have some more time before we kill you off. And one thing I thought about in the bar scene, you know, and I've talked about this somewhere before. I don't think it was with you. Oh, I was in Daughter of Dracula, and there'll be a link below that. as well as a link for the books we've talked about. But until Daughter of Dracula, men bit women, women bit men. There was no like men biting men, and Severin kills off some men. And so it's just like dogs sleeping with cats. It's chaos, when they start cross biting like that.
You think so?
I tell you, to me, it's chaos. All right. So anyway, go on. It's a whole bunch of stuff. The father and the sister of Caleb are out looking for him the whole time. It's just like Stella Luna trying to find her little lost bat cub.
Yeah.
Eventually, the vampires capture them, and Caleb gets away, but then they recapture his sister.
And they want to turn her.
They want to turn her
little boy.
Homer. Yeah. He wants a little friend. And then May comes running out and smoking and burning, and she releases his sister. They get away. He fights with Severin on the truck, and thank God he knows how to jackknife a semi truck.
Crazy.
Yeah, so he kills Severin off. Homer gets so excited he's chasing May through the sun, and he just blows up, and it just leaves Hooker and Rattlesnake, the mama of the group. They're in the car, Thelma and Louise, they're gonna just go for it. And they blow up and die before they get away. And the next thing, May wakes back up and she's all well, and he's like, "Oh, it's the sun. Just don't worry about it. It's just the sun." And so their transfusions have worked fine. And so, that being said, I have reached deep into my memory banks.
Oh.
And in House of Dracula, 1945,
Ooh.
they're trying to cure the vampires by giving them transfusions. But I believe there's a little back tracing going back. You get a little backflow on the blood. So I don't know about how well this transfusing people out of vampirism works.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a Deus Machina kind of.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we can't have our character actually stay a vampire, so how do we get out of this?
Right. But it's like, I was waiting for whoever turned May. And who was that, Homer? No, it was a Rattlesnake. Mm-hmm. So, Mom. So when Mom died, I thought May should be freed. And
that's generally how it works. You know, the head vampire or whoever turned you, that's kind of how it worked in the Vampire Chronicles, the Anne Rice books stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a very common thing. Let me see what else I got here in my notes. Okay, this was called this movie was called a vampire western.
And I saw that. I think that's very cool. I mean, this is not a setting that you find a lot of vampires in. I mean, and not to make everything about Twilight or anything, but like generally, if you're trying to stay out of the sun, do you think you're gonna choose the Southwest? There's not even trees. You know what I mean? That seems like such an interesting setting to be like, yeah, we're just going to hang out in one of the sunniest places possible, but we're just going to black out our RV and it'll be fine.
I guess it's so they could have those Western vistas. But I did some research on that because I was aware of one movie, and the one they said that this mostly resembled is Curse of the Undead from 1959, I believe. Curse of the Undead, and it's a really bad vampire Western, but it's got some really big stars in it. So I was watching a little bit of it today.
Is it an Italian movie?
No, it's got John Hoyt and some other people in it. And then, going deeper back, I remembered one of my childhood favorites. Billy the Kid versus Dracula, 1966.
Yes.
A real Western movie where Harry Carey Jr.'s mother, or Harry Carey's wife, real life wife, utters the famous line, "If I didn't know better, I would say this was a vampire bite." But so there has been a few Westerns.
But it's very uncommon.
Very few. In that movie, Billy the Kid is shooting it out with John Carradine, who is a vampire, and he gives him all 6 shots with his pistol to no effect. So he throws the pistol at him and hits the vampire in the head and just knocks him stupid.
That works.
Yeah, it works.
That is funny. It does remind me in this movie where the one guy got hit with the bullet and then it like ejects out of him.
He coughed it up, right?
Yeah.
Put it back in it. Gave it back to the guy. Yeah. So
That's kind of a power move. I kind of respect it.
yeah, you have to. So we talk about all the Lost Boy connections because this movie has been. Some of the reviews were saying this is better than the Lost Boys, but I don't
Oh,
see that.
that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I think The Lost Boys has such a special place in my heart that I could never say that. Like,
Yeah.
even if objectively this is a better movie, I still couldn't say that. You know what I mean?
I don't think it was a
But
better movie though.
obviously, this was directed by a director who has some chops. Obviously, maybe
Yes.
not at this point. I know. Obviously, she was the Zero Dark 30 person, right?
Right, and Hurt Locker. This was her
Hurt
like
Locker.
second film that she did. And
Okay,
like I said,
yeah,
the distribution deal fell apart and then just really doomed this
right.
movie.
But she went on to like win an Oscar, right? Like
Yeah.
best director for which
Yeah.
one? Hurt Locker.
Hurt Locker.
Yeah. So she's got some chops for sure.
Sure.
Um, I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't even remember the name of the director of The Lost Boys. So like, you
The
know. Okay.
Joel Schumacher. He was a pretty good director himself, but
Mhm.
yeah, I just think that they copied a lot of the tropes. They both came out in the same year. But
Oh,
they
I thought
sure
you
seem
said this came out in '96. This came out in '86.
87, I believe.
Okay, that
I
makes a little more sense
I
because
corrected. I went back and corrected it.
okay. See, that's why I was like, really? This was the '90s? I'm so shocked. It just didn't feel like it. I love the schlocky '80s horror and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
and I think that was even as I was watching it, I was making some connections to the Lost Boys, not necessarily like direct links, but I mean, it just there's certain things that even though they're not taking place in the same time period, they don't have a whole lot of like plot similarities. There's still some like tropes that I think exist in both, like Star and May, Laddie and
Homer.
Homer. There's just like
Yeah.
certain things like that. And again, the pop culture feel to it. I don't know how to describe that exactly, but that's the feeling.
The Lost Boys, of course, was, they're trying to build a family. They needed a mother. And Near Dark, they already built a family. They had a father, a mother,
Mhm.
a rebellious teen, a little kid,
Yeah.
a daughter, they had,
Hmm.
and so they both movies had the same goal. And they fell right. Westerns had kind of fallen out of popularity. And it
Hmm.
said Bigelow wanted to make a Western vampire movie. And it fell right in that gap between, before Clint Eastwood started doing Unforgiven and stuff like that, and put the cowboy movies back, Silverado and all that, put the movies back on track, the
Yeah.
Westerns. But
Right.
you had to kind of ease it in there. It wasn't a full Western, it was out West.
Yes, it takes place in the West.
Yes. Hence my fancy Southwestern
Yeah.
bandana
I
for
just went
tribute.
kind of dark, spooky. I even dyed my hair for this.
Oh, that's above and beyond the Call of Duty. All right, so you got any more connections or lore you want to talk about in this one? You
I
have 3
mean,
pages of notes.
I
So
know. I could send it to you. You feel free to browse it and just read
you could
how witty I am, but
you could sit down and you could just sit down and record, you know,
yeah.
on OBS or whatever. Record
Yeah.
and send it over.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean I could if
But
you
I
want me
really
to.
don't think we
I
need
don't think
anything.
so. The other stuff that the only stuff I really had was that Dracula's a Jewish caricature. I'm not even totally sure why I started talking about that.
Well, because you
Uh,
went back to the medieval, the
and I was
ones,
talking
and
about the bad part of Europe and
yeah,
all that sort of
because
stuff, and how Jews get to be blamed for just about anything, all the poisoning of the well, that
right,
kind of
and
stuff.
the Nosferatu vampire, and we talked about that before,
Because
and
we
we talked
talked
about
about Nosferatu.
Nosferatu, and that link will be in
Oh,
the description.
there was something that I had written about Nosferatu. There was something that oh, that's what it was. The sunlight actually killing the vampires comes
Yes.
from Nosferatu.
Oh, it wasn't in the Bram Stoker.
No, because what they do to him is they stake him, which is that folkloric
Right.
apotropaic.
Easy for you to say.
No, it's
All right.
not.
All right. So let's get down to brass tacks.
Okay.
What's the best vampire movie you've ever seen?
Oh my gosh, you asked me this last time and I still didn't have an answer for it.
Well, I'll give you, you've seen more now.
Well, it's not this one.
Let me tell you a story that I told on another podcast.
Okay.
Okay. You know, I went to London.
You did? What? I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Yeah, you
Kidding,
did.
I knew that.
And I went. That person I was with, we went
Your
down.
wife.
Yeah, that one. Then we went down to Piccadilly. I said, "Oh, it's Piccadilly Circus. I need
Yep.
to find the wait till next Wednesday porn theater."
Oh Lord.
And she got all mad, you know, like, "What are
Oh,
you doing? We ain't got no time to waste this."
flustered.
And I was like, "It's the
The American
scene."
Werewolf in London.
Yeah, I don't know. I just messed up. It wasn't a vampire. It wasn't a vampire story at all. I'm gonna cut it all out.
Okay, that's okay. You could still tell me the story.
Yeah,
But that's
anyway,
okay.
so I was like, no, it's not a porn theater. It's a place where they had a movie set and the werewolf came out. So I was going to say that my favorite vampire movie, that's a tough one. What did I say last time? It's
Here's
going
the
to have to
thing.
be Lost
Dracula,
Boys.
probably.
It's Dracula, probably. Dracula,
Yeah, and I
1932.
do think that is such an interesting movie too, because like Dracula is really where the sensual, sexy vampire comes from.
Right.
Dracula was never described as a handsome man. He's described as a Jewish caricature. He's described as aquiline, eagle nose,
Yeah.
and skinny and long white beard.
White,
He's
yeah.
not an attractive man, conventionally.
Not Frank Langella or any of those guys.
No, he's not Bela Lugosi. It's like, yeah, but it is a great movie.
Yeah. So did you answer my question? What is
I
your
did
favorite?
not answer your question.
Okay, it's the Lost Boys.
See,
then.
here's the thing. There's a difference between what's the best movie and what's my favorite movie, right?
Oh, I don't agree with that.
You
Whatever you
don't?
like, whatever you like the best whatever you like the favorite is the best movie.
Well, see, here's the thing. To me, I can recognize that I like something, and that doesn't make it good. I love schlocky, bad 80s horror movies. I love movies that nobody's ever heard of. I love movies with Todd Howard instead of Ron Howard. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Todd Howard.
Isn't that his name? No, Todd
No.
Howard. No, Todd Howard's the video game guy. Clint Howard.
Clint Howard. Yeah, that's
Yes, the ice cream man or what, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I love stuff like that.
I
And
like
so,
movies with Rance Howard in them.
is that the dad?
That's the dad. You know.
That makes sense.
So yeah, okay. So I think we covered
Lost
everything.
Boys is my favorite.
It is. It is, and it's pretty good. Friday Night, Lost Boys. I'm kind of torn,
Ooh,
you know.
neck and neck.
Yeah.
Friday Night is very good, but it also has the sexy vampire in it.
Yeah, and so that way, for that reason, I'll go with the original Dracula in English, not the
Fair
Spanish
enough.
one.
Okay.
All right. Well, look, I really appreciate you taking the time. It was very important, and it means a lot to me when you come out here and come prepared. And I appreciate you coming on the show. You got anything going on you want to tell anybody about? Got anything coming up?
No, not really. I've recorded a podcast with Savannah a while ago, and I just haven't edited it. So maybe that'll come out this month since it's spooky month.
Spooky month. That's right. It's October. We're getting ready for it. Ooh. Yes, that's why it was very important. All right, Kathryn, thanks again. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.